Good afternoon. It is episode number 33 of Real&Raw Conversations with Shalina, and I have a very, very special guest with me today. I cannot wait to show him off to you. He goes by the name of Daniel Tolson. Before we begin, if you or somebody you know is facing domestic violence, family violence, or is a victim of sexual assault, please call the National Australian Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence line. That is 1-800-RESPECT, which is 1-800-737-732. Also, if you or somebody you know is feeling suicidal and you need to talk to somebody and reach out to somebody, please do not feel ashamed. Please do not hesitate. Your mental health matters. So please call Lifeline on 13 11 14. There's no shame, not now and not ever. So please, please, please reach out if you need help. Okay, so I said I have a very, very special guest with me. And you know what? Without further ado, I'm just going to bring him on. I want you guys to meet this guy. Hello, you are on. What's going on? How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. I was loving that introduction, and just to reinforce to our friends watching, asking for help is not a weakness. Asking for help is a sign of strength, and it's only strong people who ask for support. So be strong and ring that number, Lifeline 131114. Yes. Make sure you do it straight away.
Absolutely. For my viewers, my audience who have not seen you before, actually, you were my first male guest, by the way. So this is big for me. This is really big for me. I'm actually really excited. My first male guest, manpower. I love this. You do some amazing work. Can you please tell the audience, what it is that you do, how you contribute to society, and what your purpose is, what your mission is. Why do you do what you do?
My clients often wake up one day and they say, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do next. And then they go and look for support. And when they find me, they normally want three things from me. The first one is they want influence. The second one, they want impact. And thirdly, they want income. So they want to be able to catapult their influence. They want to become more influential in the lives of their community. They want to create a bigger impact, and they want to do it faster. My clients want success now. They don't want to be like our parents who have to wait 40 or 50 years for success. They say, I don't want a gold watch when I'm retiring. I want the gold watch and the Rolex and the Mercedes now. And then all of them, they want to unleash new income levels. And when they can unleash those new income levels, they can start to help more people. Yeah. And a lot of my clients are like Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie had a goal, and he said, I'm going to make as much money as I can in the first half of my life so I can give it all away in the second half. And they know that their goals need a lot of money. And an example is one client in America. He's got more than $5 billion US a year in his business, and he's been able to feed 2 million homeless people. And he said, Daniel, we've got to make more money so we can save more lives. And so that's what my clients are looking for from me, and that's how I help them.
Wow. I love that. And why do you do it? Where did this inspiration come from to start helping people with their goals?
My mum brought it to my attention when I was really young. I was a paper boy, and I'd go from shop to shop, knocking on doors, knocking on windows, selling newspapers. And I finished my shift one day, and my uncle gave me my $1 salary, and I took 50 cents and I gave it to the Salvation Army. And my mum said to me, Daniel, why are you giving away half of your income? And I thought I was in trouble, like I'd got caught. I was like, because I just like to help people. And she said, that's a good thing. And so I had this thought in my mind at a very young age that I just wanted to help people. Now, I didn't know how I was going to do it back then. I couldn't see myself giving people COVID injections or vaccines. I couldn't see myself giving people medication. It was something like a psychologist, something to do with the mind. And I always had that thought that I wanted to help people. And then over the years, having my own traumatic experiences, I had received some really good help. And because I had broken through my own obstacles and those, that negative self-talk that we get, we convince ourselves we can't have what we want. I solved that problem and I started to feel so good. And I wanted that feeling for my people. Moses in the Bible, he said, I'm going to take you to the promised land. I'm going to part the Red Seas and we're going to go to the promised land. And so I want to part these Red Seas of fears, doubts, and limiting beliefs. And the promised land that I want to take my clients to is unlimited potential. And so I've got to part that sea for them, and the promised land is to become everything that you've ever wanted to become. And so that's why I do what I do, and that's what I got for myself, and now I want it for others.
Yes. Oh, wow. I love that. And it's the same thing that I do with, the counseling. It's really, we use our trauma and our pain and we turn it into passion and purpose. And, so what you're saying really resonates with me because it came from nowhere. I just wanted to help people. I don't know why. Maybe, as you said, the word trauma, that definitely was my reason for it. I know you're not living in Australia right now. Whereabouts are you?
I look Aussie. I sound more Aussie every year, and I live in Taiwan. So here, and I'm allowed to say it, they call me an egg. They say he's white on the outside and yellow on the inside. I'm allowed to say that. And so they call me Dan Dan, and Dan Dan is egg in Taiwan.
Like it literally means that, or that's just
Dun,
what
dun.
they...
Dun dun is egg. Dun is egg. Chai dun is like tea egg. G dun is chicken egg. So they call me dun. Dun dun.
Oh, well, I mean, dun dun, dun dun. Okay, I get it. So moving to Taiwan from Australia, how was that for you? Like, it would have been was it a culture shock rather, instead of assuming, was it a culture shock? What was that? What was that like?
It was traumatic.
Oh.
In 2010, I got a telephone call and I was working with Emirates Airline and I was in a role there called peer support. So counselling, coaching, peer support. Yep. As I said, I always wanted to help people. And when I started to work with Emirates Airline, I got into peer support. And we were trained in critical incident stress management. So when there was going to be an aircraft disaster, myself and my team would be deployed. And with the size of Emirates Airline, there's always deaths on the aircrafts. There's always turbulence and people being injured, and my team would get deployed. And as we all know, if the phone rings at 4 o'clock in the morning, there's never good news. And so my phone rang and the duty controller said, "Daniel, this is a peer support call." And I went, "Oh," and they said, "But you're not being activated." And I thought, "Oh, that's a little bit different." I said, "Well, what is it?" They said, "It's your fiance. She's been involved in an accident on the aircraft." And I went, "Oh." Now, after her accident, she ended up in surgery for 2.5 years, 3 major knee reconstructions. And at the end of her time, she then lost her job because of a permanent disability and she couldn't return to work. She was also pregnant. And because of the stress, she almost miscarried 3 times. So I was co-leading a team of 17,000 cabin crew. And now I've got to make a decision. Do I stay and pursue my career, which men love their careers? What's the most fascinating thing to men? Their careers and their cars and their toys. And I had this great career, and then I had life and love. I've got the love of my life who's about to bring a new life into the world, but we've almost lost her 3 times. And so this traumatic experience for about 3 years led me to resigning. And then we moved to Taiwan at the end of 2012. So I left my job, resigned from my job, and then I started my own business. Now, like a lot of business people, we assume we're going to achieve all of our goals. We're positive, we're optimistic, we're using the law of attraction to attract all these wonderful things, and it didn't work out. So I was in there for a year, and by the end of that year, and when I say it was traumatic, we left Taiwan to come back to Australia. And the reason why we did it was we ran out of money. We had one income since 2010, and now we got no money. So I had to come back to Australia and go on Centrelink and get social security. So thank God, Australia, we have a great social security system, and I'd paid my tax for years. So that's how I got to Taiwan, and it was traumatic. But when I went to Australia, it was equally as traumatic, and we went back to Taiwan, and we never left. So wow. It was a very stressful time.
I can imagine. And did you find the change of atmosphere challenging and uncomfortable? I mean, I'm assuming you may have felt like that. How did you deal with that?
Well, in Taiwan, I didn't deal with it. So when I got here for the first time, which was in 2012, high hopes. I'm a very optimistic person. People think I'm drunk, but I say, no, it's just the optimism. I'm just optimistic. And I thought, as men do, their career is the most important thing for them.
Yeah.
I thought my career was going to take off, but it wasn't taking off. I didn't know enough about the market. I couldn't get what I wanted online. And so I lost focus. And instead of focusing on being present here with my family and my wife and my daughter, and I wasn't focused on building my business, I thought, how do I use the law of attraction and get back to Dubai? You know how once we lose something, we want it back?
Yes.
And so I'm like, how do I get back there? And I'm going down to the shopping centre trying on these brown shoes, thinking, and I'm saying to my wife, I'm going to go in, I'm going to try on the brown shoes, I'm going to use the law of attraction, I'm going to get my job back. But every time I applied for it, they said, you're not welcome back. And it was essentially because I had resigned, they were growing, and of course they didn't want us back after my wife's experience. It was not, it's all part of the package. And so I lost focus, and then I started to have some breathing difficulties. So I said to my wife, I said, hey, you got to take me to the hospital. I can't breathe. And so I went down to the hospital, chest x-rays, blood pressure checks, and the doctor said, Daniel, everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with your lungs. It's all in your head. And what was wrong with me, and I hadn't realized it with everything that I know, and if you're in a field of coaching or counseling and psychology, you can't be your own therapist. So with everything that I knew, I was depressed and I didn't even know it. So I went back to another doctor and she said, well, Daniel, you're depressed. And I went, oh, that's not me. I know all this stuff. It's impossible. And so she said, hey, here's some tablets to help you out. It's not what I wanted, but it did give me a bit of breathing space, literally, for about a month. And then I realized that I wasn't focused on the right things. So when I say it was traumatic, very traumatic and embarrassing and shameful because of all the things that you know. However, it's just part of the journey.
It is. It is. It definitely is. It's even, when I'm dealing with my clients, they don't know. I've actually noticed that a lot of people don't realize they're going through trauma or they have endured trauma in their lives. And then I have to really go back to the basics and explain trauma is your reaction to something that happened. It's not, everybody faces it differently. So, and as you said, we can't cancel ourselves. I know when my grandmother passed away, I was going through grief and I was like, I'm going to handle this. I'm fine. And then I was like, oh, wait, I need help now.
I know how to put my head in the sand deeper than anybody else. I know those 5 stages of grief.
Yes. And that's the thing. I was telling myself, I'm like, this is the stage I'm at now. I'm in denial. Next, I'm going to feel this. And you try and counsel yourself and then you realize, not happening. Not happening at all.
It's like all the mechanics we know. They got the most beat up cars. It's like all the builders. Their renovations are never finished. The dentists, their teeth are worse than mine. I got the braces at 41 and they still don't.
I love that. What's the culture like where you are at the moment? What is it, if you had to compare it to, say, Australian life versus where you are now? What is there a major difference? Are you able to adjust to it? What does it feel like? And it's weird. I'm asking you this because I was born in Australia. I am Indian, and I sometimes feel like my identity is a bit haywire. I don't know who I am sometimes. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel being Indian, born in Australia, how they think versus how I think. I'm confused. Is how I feel.
Let me compare it to animals. It's elephants and hyenas. That's the difference. And now, if you know anything about elephants, it's a matriarchal society. And if you know anything about hyenas, they just attack and try to eat everything. And here in Taiwan, it's a matriarchal society. So our president is female. Yeah. I'm a good Asian husband. I'm a very good Asian husband. I'm a salary man. I go to work. I work hard. I give all of my money to my wife, and then I ask her for money. I listen to my mother-in-law, very good Asian son-in-law, and when my wife's grandmother was alive, would always go to her house to meet everybody. So here it's a matriarchal society. So as we go through COVID, the Prime Minister says jump and we say how high. So let's think about how we've been able to curb COVID. We have 11 local cases in Australia, in Taiwan for COVID, 11. And we're shutting down the borders and people are going to meltdown and going, oh my gosh, 11 cases. but we're approaching it as a community.
Yes.
Where in Australia, it's more like hyenas. Everybody's just attacking each other. But then they cackle away. Mask versus no mask. Vax versus unvax. My religious right. My human right. Individual society. And so it's very different. So what does that mean for me? Well, for me, and I was having a conversation with somebody the other week, and it was about racism. And I said, well, the most interesting thing is I find it really hard to understand racism because where I live, there's 95% Taiwanese and 5% expatriates. And I have never been looked down upon because of the colour of my skin. I've never been shown favouritism for the colour of my skin. I am just one of the members of the community. I'm accepted and treated as an equal.
Wow.
So for me, it's a fascinating experience where when I come back to Australia, I do get a shock because I've lived in the Middle East, in Dubai from 2007 to 2012. Every time I got into a taxi in Dubai, the culture was, hey, you're white, where are you from? I'm from Australia. Oh, wow, I'm from Pakistan. I speak Urdu. I'm from India. I'm from wherever it is in the world. And you talk to everybody. And so when I came back to Australia in 2013, I'd jump in a taxi and say, hey, salam alaikum, where are you from? I'm from Australia, mate. And I'd be totally shocked. And my mate's like, you can't say that in Australia. I'm like, I can say what I want. I'm Aussie. I'm asking them. And they're like, no, you can't literally ask somebody where they're from. And so I had to be recultured because I had come from cultures that said, where are you from? We want to know. That's fascinating. Coming back to a culture where even if I mentioned, hey, you look Aussie, you sound Aussie, were you born here? I had to relearn all of that. And that was a shock for me coming back to my own country. And it still is today. The last time I was there was in 2019. Yeah. And I have to reculture myself to adapt. So I say to people, I look Aussie, I sound Aussie, but I'm not. I've lived outside of the country for at least 15 years and I'm relearning what it's like when I come back.
Wow. So how many times have you come back to Australia and has each time felt a bit of a culture shock to you?
Well, the first culture shock is I've got an Asian belly. Now, I don't know if this happens to your relatives when they come over to Australia, but let's say here in Taiwan, we eat a lot of rice. And then all of a sudden we come to Australia and we're eating carbs and breads and pasta, and my belly just pops out straight away. And so I've got a Taiwan dudesy, which means a Taiwanese belly. So the first thing, I've got to adapt to the food. Yes. I've got to adapt to the different cultures. And so here in Taiwan, in my community, people can read English. They can speak a little bit, but their confidence speaking English is not there. Yeah. So they tend to speak Chinese. But I don't understand the language. It's a very hard language to learn, and I haven't put a lot of time or effort, to be honest, into learning it because it's also very spiritual for me. It's a very spiritual experience. My connection with myself is a lot deeper here because when I walk down the street, and I just went and got a hot chocolate before, I can walk down the street. I can't listen to the news. I don't understand what's happening on the news stations. I can't read the newspapers. I can't hear the gossip. I can't hear all the bullshit stories. And so I've achieved a level of inner peace that most people would have never experienced because this information from the outside world isn't getting processed in my mind.
Yes.
So it's a spiritual experience. However, when I come to Australia, I can understand everything and I'm totally bombarded. Once I fly into Australian airspace, we start to get the notice from the Australian government about quarantining. And then you come into the airport and you can read everything, you can hear everything, and you're hearing all the bullshit stories and all the complaints. And I'm like, ah!
It feels like the peace has been destroyed almost, like the peace you had. You come back here and you're like, oh no, now it's subconsciously in the back of my mind now and I can hear it everywhere I go type of thing, isn't it?
And you can't turn down your attention.
No.
You can't turn down your attention. I can't turn the volume down on my ears. I'm just processing all of this stuff and consciously I've got to constantly reject. It's like, don't listen to that. Reject, stop. However, that's very draining on my personal economy. So that's a big shock when I come back. So how many times I've been back? Normally I come back to the country every 2 to 3 months. So I'm always in and out of the country. But because of COVID, I haven't had to come back since 2019. So it's been a big break. This has probably been the longest gap that I've spent out of the country, even since 2007, because I'd always come back for business.
And I anticipate that when you do come back, it's going to be so weird because of all the COVID restrictions and the QRs and the check-in. Like, I can anticipate how strange that would be once again. I guess you could call it. It's a bit of a culture. I guess it's a culture thing that's happening now. But yeah,
well, it's the attitude, and how I define attitude is our angle of approach.
Yes.
So as Taiwanese, our angle of approach is we listen to our matriarchal society, we listen to our leader, and she says, we want you to do this. And people comply because it's a community. However, Australia is an individualistic society. It's every man for themselves. It's like the jackals, the hyenas. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You can't make me do that. I'm not going to wear a mask. And so I've got to be able to put up with that when I come back. And I sent a photo to my friend the other day. He's like, we can't get these rat tests in Australia. And I'm walking over to 7-Eleven and they're lined up on the shelves. So there's no panic buying here. We can get all of that. You don't have to wait 7 or 8 hours for a test here. I just go across the street and get it whenever I want.
You know, they're selling it on the black market here, which is really sad to see. A lot of ladies that I deal with, they're pregnant, they're needing the test. And people are ripping them off and saying, the tests here are about, say, $10, $15, something like that, no more than that. And people are ripping them off saying, hey, I can sell you, because it comes in a pack of 5, I can sell you the pack for $125, where at the chemist, I believe it's only like $50, $60. And it makes me so upset that people are doing it. And then my counselor side comes out and is like, maybe they're desperate for money and they're trying to make ends meet. And then my ethical side comes out and is like, no, this is wrong. This is immoral. You shouldn't be doing this. But it's happening, and it's been happening for a while now. And I'm sad. I'm sad for the community right now that this is what they're facing.
And that's the individualistic society. That's what they do. The communal society says that's not good for the community. The individualistic society says, well, I'm a fucking entrepreneur and I'm going to make money on this. Yes. And they do it.
They're doing. And part of it is a culture thing as well. In my culture, I know that there is a desperation for money, especially when you come here from India, living in Australia, by hook or by crook, you're trying to make ends meet. So in their minds, they're justified. They're like, you know what? I don't give a shit. I've got a family to feed. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. And then people like me, born and brought up here, are like, really? Is that necessary? Like, you're vulnerable people, you're taking advantage. And so I get torn.
In Australia, the only way you lose face if a current affairs comes and gets up in your face with a camera, and we're going to make you lose your face publicly. But here in Taiwan, they'll make you lose face here publicly in the community. And so face is so important here. And my wife says to me sometimes, she said, Daniel, you got to remember that over here, you've got to save people's face. And what I say is, well, I'm Aussie, we don't save anybody's face. And we don't care if somebody makes us lose face anyway.
Do you find yourself like balancing between what the culture is like there versus your Aussie side coming out? Are you a bit like, you're thinking Aussie and then you're like, wait a second, I can't.
Yeah, and then I just justify it based on what suits me.
Isn't that what we all do?
Like my wife, she goes, hey, you can't make people lose face like that. And I said, well, I'm Aussie. And then at other times, when she says, something about Australia, I'll say, well, don't worry about that. I'm Taiwanese. And she goes, show me your passport. And I said, I don't need a passport to be Taiwanese. I said, I got 2 kids who got passport. She goes, well, they're just as Aussie as you. So in our community, my kids, they definitely look Aussie. They're loud like Aussie kids. They sound like me. And my wife's always like, tell your kids to be quiet. I said, oh, they're just Taiwanese kids. She's like, they're not Taiwanese kids. They're Australian kids. They're so loud. And so if I go to the shopping centre and all the kids are quiet and my kids are being loud, I just shrug my shoulders and say, well, that's just Aussie kids.
It wasn't me. It's just kids.
Total justification. That's how we deal with the negative emotions. We'll justify it.
Wow.
I'm entitled to have children like this. But that's the fun part, and I believe that the culture here is very adapting, and they're intelligent people, they're educated people, Taiwanese, so they know that different people behave differently. So they don't look down upon you, and they're very accepting. See, they're Buddhist.
Yes.
They're Buddhist society, so they say, hey, well, we've got to learn to get along with everybody, which is quite a nice feel.
Yes. You know, something I came to a realization of recently, more than before, I feel like our culture, different cultures, they play a part in limiting beliefs. And I realized that with my culture, it plays a very big part in limiting beliefs of what people believe they can do, should not do, because, oh, I'm brown, or, oh, English is not my first language, or, oh, in my culture, we're not allowed to do this. Women can't do this, or men can't do this. What do you think about that?
What was that comment on your YouTube? I was watching your YouTube channels last night, and I was watching one of your videos, and there was a comment on there. I don't know if you've seen it, but somebody said, once you've tried brown, you'll never turn around.
Oh, yes, I think I have seen that. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just left it there. It's a strange comment, though.
Yeah. Leave it there. What was the question again? Oh, limiting beliefs. Okay.
Like culture and limiting beliefs. Like, what are your thoughts on it? Because coming from an Indian background, I know that my culture has limited people from, like, Indians from living the life they want. They're bound by the culture. They're bound by what parents' expectations is very huge, very, very huge in my culture. Academic abuse, things like that, or staying in unhealthy marriages. These things they're cultural, and it stops them from thinking outside the square, that they can be happy, that they can do other things. But it's like culture ends up being this bubble that they just live inside, and they don't. I feel like bursting this bubble, which is why I do all these live streams, but that's just, I mean, I guess it's my perception of it coming from, an Indian background, but I wanted to know what yours was on that.
Well, it's a perception, and it's also a reality. And this is what I see here. So I was on a call with a young gentleman not long ago. Handsome young guy, talented young guy, beautiful voice, singing, playing guitar. And I said to him, what prevents you from getting what you want? And he said, his words, I'm just an Asian dude. And that was his words, I'm just an Asian dude. So what I've been learning with the culture in Southeast Asia here, sometimes they do the looking down on themselves, which this young man was. He was looking down on himself because of where he's born. I'm just an Asian dude. And they compare themselves against the Western world and people from the Western world, which is totally unrealistic thing to do, but it creeps their way in the mind. So I've seen that. I've also seen a lot of women getting married, and they say, we don't get married for love. We get married for the family. And so they're getting married for the family. And even they know they're going to these relationships and they're toxic. They're going to get abused and taken advantage of. They still do it for the happiness of maybe their parents. Recently, my wife was working with a lady, and is still here in Taiwan. Men can have multiple wives. It's not as common as it used to be, but it's still quite common. And if the wife doesn't accept it, he may just choose to move on. But culturally, the women say, well, I can't leave my husband. And you'll ask why? Well, who's going to pay for my mum and dad to be taken care of? Who's going to pay for my children? Who's going to pay for my car? Who's going to pay for my rent? Who's going to pay for my lifestyle?
Yes.
And so that traps them there. So their limiting beliefs are that I can't fund my family life. I can't support myself. If this stability is taken away, we can't survive.
Yes.
And so we see a lot of that where that just wouldn't exist in a lot of traditional Australian homes. People wouldn't be able to process that. Like, I've never heard an Australian say, I'm just an Aussie dude, and that's why I can't succeed.
Or it's in my culture, that's why I can't.
Or it's in my culture. No, I've never heard any Australian-born people who have said, well, I can't leave this person because they fund all of this family stuff. That concept doesn't tend to exist. It tends to be a little bit more cultural.
Yeah.
So I do see some limitations here in the cultures and their different limiting beliefs that we don't tend to see in, say, Australia, the UK, or USA. It is very contextual to this region of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that when I question things that happen in my culture, I'll say, but why do we do this? Why?
You should be proud of your bloodline.
Yeah. Or it's like, my favorite answer is, because that's how it is. I get so mad. Okay, that is how it is. You did it for ages. You didn't question it. I'm questioning it because I can't find logic. So why is it that we do what we do? And you can't get an answer. It's just something that was inherited. It was just passed down. 1, 2, 3. It's just like how trauma is passed down. Intergenerational trauma is passed down. Culture is passed down. And I feel like sometimes there's no logic to certain thoughts, or the thoughts are a bit too primitive. Even things like domestic violence, I know, is passed down. It's in the culture, and Indian culture is very patriarchal, and women are expected to stay at home. It's a bit modern. It's getting a bit modern now, but it's still happening. And it's so hard for women to leave because the man's like, I'll take care of everything. But then the women don't have a source of income, no finances.
There's no coping mechanism.
There's no coping mechanism. And I think to myself, can we change culture? We have to start by challenging it, but can we change it? And if we can, how do we change it? Where does it start? That's the dilemma that I have in my mind. And I constantly have that because I think, how can I challenge this? How can I change this? What do I do? But I guess culture is a collective communal thing. So communities and an entire group of people need to start changing with me. But that's what I seem to question all the time. How do I challenge and change these perceptions within culture?
The interesting thing with Taiwanese, and it's true for a lot of the regions in the world here, is that they have a lot of spiritual beliefs.
Yes.
And these spiritual beliefs are so ingrained into them that there's huge fears built in. So, for example, I love money. There's no secret about that. If I want to achieve my goals, if I want to impact lives, I need a lot of money. If I want to be able to hear you, I've got to have these headphones. If I want to be able to speak to this audience, I've got to have a microphone. I've got to have the internet. I've got to have this computer. We need money. And so in Taiwan, I play this game with my kids. I'm like, I'm going out to look for money. And I'll walk down the street and I'll find $1 on the ground. And I'll pick up $1 and I'll say, look, I'm rich. And my daughter says, Dad, you should never laugh at $1. And she says, because $1 added up equals a lot of dollars. And then other days I'll find $10 and I'll say, I'm rich. And she'll say, good on you, Dad. However, I can do that for 11 months of the year until the 12th month, which is called Ghost Month. And if I pick up money on the 12th month and put it in my pocket and bring it home, all the superstitions kick in. So my wife's like, do not pick up the money. Even if it's $1,000, don't pick it up. Even if it's $1 million, I say, what if it's $2 million? She goes, no, don't pick it up. Because what they do here spiritually, the Taiwanese, if they feel they're being attacked by spirits during ghost months, they will throw money on the ground. And so the superstition is that the ghost is attracted to the money and the ghost will stay with the money and it won't follow them home. So even with my wife, as worldly as she is, for 11 months of the year, she's happy with me to pick up money on the ground. But when ghost months comes around, I am not allowed to pick up any money. And there's so much superstition around it. She doesn't want the jinn. She doesn't want the ghost coming home. So, the question is, how do you get that out of an individual? That's tough because it's reinforced by the grandmother. And the grandmother will say to the grandkids, don't let your dad pick up money. And then if the great-grandmother's still alive, that's going to be reinforced. So it's being reinforced generationally.
Yes.
So albeit you can take the individual out of that environment, and you can desensitize them to that. Once you put them back into the environment, and because of peer pressure, they'll probably have to assume those beliefs even for a short period of time. So the same is true in Papua New Guinea. If the medicine man takes the bone and he waves the bone at you, and you believe that shaking the bone at you can cause death, the body will shut down within 24 hours. Somebody can be dead within 2 to 3 days of having the bone waved at them. This is true for the Aboriginal community in Australia. If they see, I forget the name of it, but the Aboriginal medicine man, if they see him and he points the feather at them, they can collapse and they can start to die. So it's ingrained, not just into the conscious mind, into the subconscious mind, it's right down there in the DNA. And that's more than a generational improvement. It's going to take more than our lifetime.
Yes. This is when we talk about breaking generational cycles and curses, or whatever word you want to use. I know that I'm in the process of that, and so many people are, but it can't be broken in my lifetime. I have kids, they have kids, but it has to start somewhere. And it starts from waking people up to the things that, they don't make sense, or they're not necessary. The thoughts, the limiting beliefs that may not be necessary. Why are these thoughts limiting you from doing what you do? I wanted to ask you, in your field...
Can I give you one example?
Yeah, sure. Of course.
I grew up and my grandfather was Roman Catholic. My mum is one of these Pentecostal Christians, and she'd go to the churches where they all jump around and sing and dance, and my brother wanted to be a pastor at one of those. And my dad's belief was like, if I go to the church, the roof's going to cave in, so he just won't go. And so I've grew up in that environment, and then I was also told, don't touch the Ouija board. Don't muck around with the spirit. So albeit they don't really believe it, it's within them. They're like, don't play with that spiritual world. So my wife and I, we went to Thailand back in 2009. I think it was on our very first holiday. And she wanted to get a spiritual tattoo from one of the top monks over there to get a blessing. And that's what she believes in. And when we were there, they performed an exorcism. And they were performing an exorcism in Thailand with a woman who had been possessed by the spirit of a child. Now, I'm not here to say that they exist. I'm not here to deny it. I just went there and I had an experience. And I sat in the room, and I'm very open-minded. And I said, I'm going to sit here and watch. My wife said, if you want to leave, you don't have to watch. And I said, no, I'm quite fascinated. And I sat in this room, and I didn't understand the language that the Buddhist monks were chanting, but they were chanting. And then I was watching the head monk speak to the person who was possessed by the spirit. And I saw somebody transform in front of me. I saw some woman go from a woman to a child, and then I saw a child trapped in a woman's body interacting with the monk. And I could see and hear this transformation. You could see the physiological shift, the environment that we're in. It went from being hot and humid, as Thailand is, to cold. It was like I was in a refrigerator. And then there was like this energy was going around this room, and I'm very objective. I'm going, okay, well, I know I haven't been drinking, I haven't been smoking, I'm not doing drugs. I am present. This must be happening. And then these two monks next to me started vomiting bile. They just started going, vomiting into plastic bags. And then he drew the spirit out and everything went back to normal, and everybody acted as if nothing happened.
Oh my God, Father.
And so I went in there and I went, what a wonderful experience. And so I was always told, don't go near that stuff, but here I'm sitting within it. And so now I can live in two worlds, and I'm free to make my own mind up because I've seen both sides. Don't go near it, make up your own mind. And so I don't get involved in it because I know that there's something that I don't understand there. I don't fear it, but I'm also not engaged in it. I'm quite neutral to it.
Yeah. That's exactly with trying to break down cultures as well. Like when we're relating to it, you don't have to, be right there doing it, but you can be objective and just observe everything that's happening to create a decision for yourself. It's not like you have to go through something to make a decision. You can see it happening in front of you,
Yep. My parents said, hey, don't do drugs. And they then took us down to King's Cross, and they'd drive us around King's Cross, and they'd say, well, this is what it looks like to get addicted to drugs. So now you know. And then at 10 years old, you go, oh, that's a little bit strange. But now at least you've seen both sides of the story, and you're free to choose for yourself what you want to do.
Yes. It's the same as when your parents tell you don't drink and this and that. But Sometimes until you get drunk, you don't really know what that feels like.
Yeah, until you passion some hot girl or some hot guy and going, maybe the alcohol did help. I was a much better dancer. I couldn't dance like you, but after, I had a couple of beers and my wife still says I dance like a robot, but I don't feel like a robot. I feel like Magic Mike. It probably doesn't look like that.
Oh, I love that. I wanted to ask you, in your field of work, have you dealt with, we talk about domestic violence as a women issue, women go through it, which is, yes, 100% they do. But have you dealt with men who have gone through domestic violence? And if you have, what was that like? Because that would have been a very different shift in perspective to how we deal with women, how we interact with women, and what we believe of women going through. What was it like from a man's perspective, from a male's perspective, when you sort of dealt with that?
For the men, first of all, it's totally unexpected. I think for everybody who goes through domestic violence, you never expect it at the start.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen to you. It's never been that close to home. And all of a sudden, they're in these relationships and there's domestic violence. And for them, it can be very dramatic. And what they've said to me is they say, Daniel, males want to throw punches. However, the women can throw words. However, the women can throw the words, but nobody can see our bruises. And so these men are being beaten up and bruised with words and push. And women can be very articulate. Women can really get, men and women, very emotional. Yes. But what men want to do when they deal with anger is they want to hit something, but they know they can't hit back. So it becomes very dramatic. The third thing that happens to them is they feel really isolated and they feel really embarrassed because who do I go to confidentially to say that I'm a victim of domestic violence? I'm being abused. Emotionally, people can't see the scarring.
Yes. There's
financial abuse. I'm just working 60 hours a week and I'm on the verge of bankruptcy, but my wife's just pushing me to spend. I am broke. I've got no options.
Yeah.
And so they feel embarrassed because they're so isolated, because we always hear about the ladies being abused, but what about the blokes?
What about the men?
And so normally what I've seen is they can be in these relationships for years. And I think just like the ladies, they just keep smiling. They keep pretending everything's okay. And the fourth thing is that they don't know who to ask for help. Even as my coach, I remember one of my clients, after about 3 years of coaching, he finally let the cat out of the bag. And he said, you know what, I'm being abused in this relationship. And I said, I would have never have picked it. For as intimately engaged as we are, I would have never picked it. And he had no coping mechanism. And he didn't even have a coping mechanism of knowing how to begin the conversation. How do I bring this up to my coach who's never criticized me, who always listens to me? How do I start this conversation? Like, I don't want to look like some type of loser or some type of weakling. I'm a successful business person. And so they don't know how to begin that conversation. And a lot of them suffer in silence. I've seen it happen to many men, and even a good friend of mine. For him, he said, my child is being used as a weapon against me. And I'll never forget those words. My child is being used as a weapon against me. And see, everybody went, oh, we love you, missus. She's a lovely girl. And he's going, oh, if you only knew what it was like to live with this person. And even for a friend to say that to me, I didn't even see it from an outsider. And we were close. So it is tough for them.
It is. It's very challenging to speak out about it. And I think they're scared of, how do I leave? Where do I go and how do I leave? I think they would have the same fear as, women do as well, of where to go, how to leave, what to do, and the children, because of course we know women usually get the rights to the children, or the women use the children as bait against men. And I hate that. I hate that children are used in the middle between two adults having an issue. Why would you bring your child into the middle of it? I just feel like that's a test of the mother's character. Like that shows her character for her to do that to the man.
It's like that thing my friend said to me. My children being used as a weapon against me.
Yeah.
It's hard to get your head around it.
Yeah. When you've dealt with men who are victims of domestic violence, what have you found? Have you found anything very challenging? Like, what is the most challenging thing when you are dealing with men who are going through this? What do you find is the most challenging, or few things that are challenging? I'm sure there's more than one.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is they're trying to deal with the symptomology. And what I mean by that is people are trying to deal with what's happening today.
Yes.
But they're not getting back to the root cause of where a lot of this stuff started. So with all the men that I've worked with, they've all had abandonment issues with their father in their formative years. And they are petrified of abandonment. They don't want another person to leave them. They're even willing to stay in a domestic violence relationship because that gives them a form of safety and security. Because should that person actually leave, they go back to that feeling of, oh my gosh, I've been abandoned once again.
Yeah.
And a lot of these men have had fathers who have left their mothers early on. But their fathers may have even been perpetrators with their mothers. So they've been through this cycle already. And it's now, as you mentioned before, it's now generational. And they want to do everything in their power to hold on and keep that relationship because it's devastating. I've already lost my family unit, being that my father left my mother and my brothers, and now it's going to happen again today. This is everything that I worked towards avoiding. You know, I wanted to avoid that my whole life, but now it's happening in my life.
Yeah.
And all of them have had that root cause, and most of them have taken that emotion, and all of us, we've got that special little place where we take all those things that we can't deal with and we shove it down there out the back somewhere, and we say, one day I'm going to pay attention to that. So one day, someday Island, today's the day, and they go, oh my gosh, I can't deal with that hurtful stuff and I don't really want to deal with this now. And so, you know, you get back into that grief cycle. Just going to go into denial. I'm going to dig a bigger hole. I'm going to build a really nice hole that I can hide inside. And that's a challenge. And oftentimes it's called a career. I'm just going to hide in my career. One lady I had a podcast with not long ago, she was in a domestic violence relationship and she put on like 45 or 50 kilos of weight. And she said how she dealt with it. She just spent 19 hours a day at work. So that was her whole. I'm just going to go to work, 19 hours a day, put on the weight. Hopefully he doesn't find me attractive and hopefully he leaves me. That's how I'm going to deal with it. And the men do similar things. I met another guy in Sydney, and you know, it was an interesting coping mechanism. When he was younger, he grew up and he was super handsome. He said, Daniel, you know, I'm 6'5", really handsome. The ladies used to hit on me. And I didn't know how to deal with it. So how he dealt with that was he just put on weight. And as he put on weight, women found him less attractive and they stopped talking to him. But then he got into his 40s, and what did he want? He wanted a relationship. But who was he going to become if he lost all of this weight? He was the big guy. He was the, you know, that fat token guy who's super lovable, really laughable, non-threatening. The women like him, feel safe. He's like, well, if I have to lose the weight, who am I going to become? So all of the root causes have to be dealt with.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think sometimes it's guilt that stops them from leaving? Guilt of maybe their wife is dependent on them, or obviously if they have children, that guilt of where are my children going to go if I'm not providing, or what is my wife going to do if we're separated, or even the guilt of leaving the wife if the wife is somewhat dependent. Do you think guilt plays a factor in men not leaving these type of relationships?
100%. Once we start to get down into the depths of guilt, before I started to learn about emotional intelligence, I thought guilt was guilt. That was it. Oh, guilt. But then I started to realize that there's actually 5 types of guilt. Now, the first type of guilt is for doing something that breaks your own moral code. So, for example, if you believe that a man and woman should be together and they should be together forever under marriage, then to consider leaving that marriage would be breaking your values. That evokes guilt. So what people say is, you know, I said to death do us part. I'm just going to deal with this domestic violence. But it makes them feel guilty. So yes, they do feel guilty. Secondly, if they believe that marriage is for life and they even consider the thought of leaving, that evokes the same amount of guilt as actually leaving. So I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. Just the fact of leaving or thinking about leaving evokes guilt.
Mm.
Thirdly, we have another type of guilt. And this is the guilt for all the things that we want to do. So if I have dreams of having a new marriage, a happy marriage, if I have dreams of being in a healthy relationship and I don't achieve that, that evokes guilt.
Yeah.
And then we have the two main ones which we can really focus on here. First is compassion fatigue. And what tends to happen is you try to cancel your partner. You try to make changes within yourself to make your partner happy. And then you realize there's nothing else that you can give away. I've given away my youthful looks. I've given you all the children. I've given you all the money, all the cars, all the time. I've even cut off my family. I've cut off all of my friends. I don't follow my passions. And I can't do anything else to help you, who's the perpetrator. I can't do anything else for you. And then they have what's called compassion fatigue. And then they feel guilty because they can't give away anything else.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one, and I think this is really tied in with the children, it's called survivor guilt. So whether it be male or female, as soon as they leave the partner, those children are going to be used as weapons and they're going to be subjected to that behavior from the mother or father. And if the father leaves the mother, he feels guilty because his children, his bloodline, his DNA is now trapped in that house. Vice versa, men or women, it's the same. And they feel guilty. And so guilt traps them in there.
Guilt. Absolutely. And there's also a type of domestic violence that we don't speak about much, and that's immigration abuse. And very prevalent in my culture, people marrying for the sake of visas. My dad did that to my mum, married her for visa, used her for visa. And men and women are both doing this. You know, I deal with domestic violence victims. And the main problem here is the immigration status, because the husband or the wife keeps threatening, I'm going to deport you. I'm going to kick you out of this country. I'm going to deport you tomorrow. Or the partner relies on the main applicant for their visa application and they have no idea what's going on. And they're so dependent. And this visa is this thing that's held against them. Like, you do anything, this visa?
I gotcha.
See you later. I gotcha. So that's another very common thing that happens a lot, especially in my culture. I'm sure there are other cultures that go through this as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, that immigration abuse is a thing. It's a very big thing. And when you tie domestic violence to it, it honestly feels like there's no escape for men or women.
I could agree with you 100%. It's like here where I live in Taiwan, I'm on my wife's household registration. And I could totally understand that at any time I could leave the country, maybe I couldn't come back. I'm dependent on my wife for everything here because the way that the household registration is set up. I can't get a Taiwanese passport. The only way I can get a Taiwanese passport is to denounce or renounce or tear up my Australian passport. So she can have two, my children can have two, but I could only have one. So I could understand anybody who would be in a position, although I'm not, hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's not happening to me, but I could understand what would be happening because I'm in a foreign country. I don't know the language. How do I get to the airport? How do I call for help? How do I get support?
Yes.
All of those things. I could imagine that as being an expatriate could happen to be a frightening experience because, you know, bank accounts, employment can be all tied to that, your livelihood. Absolutely.
Yes. I just did a live stream just not a few days ago, and I was asking the reasons why people have children. And visa is one of the reasons some people, they have children, is to tie them to the partner. And I've noticed a lot of Indian women have done this. If they're forced into having kids, I'm not referring to them, but the people who have the choice, once again, I can't tell you what to do with your body, but when you have the choice, their choice to have children is, I want to stay in this country because when the child's 10, you become an Australian citizen, or they don't want their partner to kick them out. They want to tie themselves to the partner in any way possible to stay in the country or to not end up single, because in culture and what will people say, and divorce is shameful. So all these things, all that binds a person to a relationship or to children is, sometimes it's just so sad when I hear these things. And sometimes, you know, you realize as a counselor, as a coach, you can't necessarily help every single person. It's not possible to help everybody. And it took me a while to realize that. And I was like, wow, I can't help you to the extent that I want to, because part of this doing is actually you've created this and you've done this. There's only so much I can do to help you. The rest is up to you. Do you find that with your clients as well, that you find you want to do more, but you're like, I just can't? Not possible.
There's three things to make a permanent change. And the first one is you've got to work on your mindset.
Yes.
You've got to work on your mindset. Secondly, you've got to change your values.
Yes.
That's the second thing. And then thirdly, you've got to change your environment.
Yes.
And some of these challenges that you've mentioned here are environmental challenges. And oftentimes it's getting out of the environment that is the hardest thing. It's so hard. You know, I've left Australia and I've moved to the Middle East. I've moved to the Middle East to Taiwan. The hardest thing is to move the environment. I can change my mindset. I can change my feelings and what's important to me.
Yes.
But adapting to a physical environment is something totally different. And if you're tied into it legally, if you're tied into it with children and contractually with visa applications and all these rewards that they could possibly get, and then you've got to cut that cord and walk away from that environment, that is super tough.
Yes.
And that's why I see a lot of men and women not leaving a domestic violence relationship.
Yes.
Because the upheaval in the unrooting of where they've been and moving to somewhere else is oftentimes the hardest thing.
Yes.
Now, what do you do when you've got no money? Do you take your children and you put them in alcoholics refuge or a short-term home? Sometimes those places are more subjective to abuse because of the other people in those environments.
Yes.
Do you take your children out of that and do you live on the streets? You know, what do you do if there's no money? That's tough.
Yes.
Leaving the environment. And so I think a lot of people, what we've got to realize that our life is a reflection of our decisions. Our decisions determine our actions, and then those actions determine the results that we have. So we've got to start to make better decisions in our life. And there's one beautiful thing that all of us should stop and do and ask ourselves the question, knowing what I now know, what would I do differently next time? And at least if you just ask yourself that question, you might not repeat the same mistake. And at least that gives you a foot outside of that physical environment, something that you can do differently next time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough when you're tied to things, and I think that's also once again a limiting belief. They're scared. They feel limited by choice, by culture, by children, by partner. They feel so limited that it's easier for them to stay than to go. And I've noticed some of people who are suffering abuse, they would rather stay where the partner is so they can see what their partner's doing rather than go. Because at least I know my partner's here. But if I go, what if he or she comes after me? Then what's going to happen? What if they come after the children? So they stay because they can
my
see.
partner doesn't beat me up as much as the other guy across the street beating his wife up. My husband's not as bad. It could be worse.
Yes.
It's better the devil you know.
Yes.
You know, at least I only get beaten up 3 days a week, and I know what days I'm going to get beaten up. You know, Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, he says the only thing standing between you and what you want is the bullshit story that you keep telling yourself why you can't have what you want. And we've got to remember what we're made of, our DNA. We've got so much of it. If we took our DNA and we stretched it out from where we are today to the sun and back, our DNA would stretch out and it would go from where you are to the sun and back 100 times. We are absolutely unlimited. And that's what I say to my clients. I'm going to part the Red Sea for you. We're going to get rid of those fears, doubts, those limiting beliefs. And the promised land is unlimited potential. And once you realize that you are unlimited, you'll actually become more creative. You'll actually start to leverage your resources to make a change. But those limiting beliefs, they filter out the world and you can't see your true possibilities. So what happens is you might say, well, this is it. It happened to my mum. It was destined to happen to me. And maybe this is just my life choice this lifetime. But if that's your limiting belief, you won't see any contradictory information that's coming through. You won't even see lifeline number down the bottom. You'll say 131114. Oh, maybe I don't have enough credit. Maybe my battery's flat on my phone. Maybe I can't call that number. And that's when all the bullshit stories creep in.
Yes, yes. I wanted to talk to you about past lives, past life regression, something I'm really curious about it. It's not something I know a lot about, but it has evoked curiosity. And I wanted to know more about it, something that might help our audience if they might choose to go down this path to understand their mental health, maybe why they do what they do. What is it? What is a past life regression, and why might people choose to go through it, I think is the question.
I flew over to the United Kingdom and I was in Manchester and I met a gentleman and he said, Daniel, my life's terrible. He says, I'm full of guilt, my relationship's broken down and my daughters don't talk to me. He said, I really want some help. He goes, I've really tried everything. He said, I've been to all these personal development events, but I can't seem to get my breakthrough. I'm stuck and I don't know what to do next. And I said, well, why don't you come along to our event? And over the next 5 days, I'm going to help you understand who you are and why you think and feel the way that you do. And he said, and what are we going to do there? And I said, well, on day 2, we're going to start to do some past life regressions. And he said, I'm an atheist. And I said, well, what's that? I knew what it was, but I said, what's that? And he goes, I don't believe in any of that bullshit. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in past life stuff. And I said, well, it looks like you're in pain. And it looks like what you're doing is not working. So if you've tried a whole bunch of things and they didn't work, could you keep your mind open for a couple of more days? And he looked at me and I said, mate, you know, your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And he giggled and he went, okay, rightio. So on day 2, we start to do a past life regression. Now, all of us have a past. All of us have to come to a realization that there was a yesterday. There was yesterday. There was last week. There was last month. There was last year. There was your childhood. There was that time in the womb of your mother. And so we all have a past. And even if you just believe this lifetime from now to the time of your birth was part of your past life, then what we do in a past life regression is we go back and we review the events that have taken place. See, there's always been events in our life. And through these lifetime events, we make decisions. And then we have beliefs about what's possible for us. And when we're doing past life regressions, we're going back to have a look at what were some of these traumatic events in our life? What were some of these significant emotional events? And when we're younger, and if there's a history of abuse within our family, whether it be domestic violence, spiritual violence, financial violence, at a young age, we don't know how to cope with this. So what we do is we take those memories and, you know, that place, you put them over there and you repress them and you say, I don't want to deal with that. Now, your unconscious mind actually takes that memory and it says, I'm going to put it over here because at the moment it's too traumatic for you. You don't have a resource to deal with it. You don't have the time. You don't have the energy. I'm going to keep it repressed. But through our life, it keeps coming back up to the surface. And what do? Oh, I don't want to deal with that now. My father. My mother. My uncle. Go away. And we get busy. So in a past life regression, what we're doing is we're going back to have a look at what are some of these life experiences that make you you. Yeah. Now, the most fascinating part is 30% of Americans believe that past lives exist. So we're not saying that they believe in this lifetime. 30% of Americans say that I believe that there has been other lifetimes that have led to this. Yeah. Now, in that notion, so where did I come from? Holy moly, I'm 15,000 genomes of my father. I'm 15,000 genomes of my mother. Oh, now, do I look like my mum and dad? You betcha. Do I sound like them? You betcha. Do I have preferences and tastes like them? You betcha. So my life is a mix of their life. Yeah. But where did they come from? Well, they came from 2 separate, different sets of parents. So what we see today is that people look like children, look like their parents. They have beliefs like their parents. They dress, they walk, they sound like them. And so when we explore this notion of past lives, we're also having a look at the genealogy. What are some of these traumas that keep repeating in your family? And I have seen families with 2 and 3 generations of incest. Incest just keeps repeating around through the family, generation after generation after generation. 3 generations ago, they didn't solve it. It repeated again. 2 generations ago, it didn't solve it. Repeats it again. happens in this lifetime, and then somebody wakes up and says, this has to stop in my lifetime.
Yes.
And so then what they're doing is they're just really exploring another part of their mind. Here in Asia, when we say Asia, we're talking about the greater Asia, China, Japan, India. We believe in past lives. More than half of the world's population believes in past life. And part of taking on these past lives, we also incorporate the root cause, Chinese medicine, the root cause. We think about the Ayurvedic healing methods, getting back to the root cause. So it's just another way to explore our unconscious mind. Now, that gentleman who came to me and he said, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in any of this stuff. He started to have a past life regression. I've got it on video. Anybody can see it. The world can see it if you want to see it. And he starts crying. Ah! And I said, what's going on? He said, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I said, what's happening? He says, I'm alive 2,000 years ago. And I said, what's that emotion? He said, I'm feeling guilty. Now, I said, what's happening? He says, Daniel, he goes, I don't believe in any of this stuff. He says, but I can see myself alive in a lifetime 2,000 years ago. Now, if anybody's thought about what was happening 2,000 years ago, you might remember a guy named Jesus of Nazareth and his enemy, Pontius Pilate. And so he said, Daniel, he goes, I was alive at the time of the crucifixion. And he said that I was one of the followers, and I was asked about Jesus. Do I know Jesus? And he said, I denied his existence. And he said, I feel like I've been carrying that guilt. And as he came back from that lifetime, he looked at other lifetimes and he said, Daniel, I just have repeated this same pattern of guilt after guilt after guilt through 4 other lifetimes. And then he's bawling his eyes out and he said, I'm repeating the same mistakes this lifetime as I did in the previous ones. And this is an atheist, somebody who says, I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in any of this past life crap.
Wow.
And he's the first to cry in the room. Now, our unconscious mind, it brings to the surface repressed memories. Now, the unconscious mind is symbolic. So I'm not saying past lives exist. I'm just saying that they could possibly exist. I can't prove that they exist. I can't disprove it. It was like that time I was watching The Exorcism. All I can see is 2 different opinions, and I'm here having an experience. So he had this experience. He resolved the negative emotions. A year later, I've got the text message. He writes to me, he says, Daniel, you wouldn't believe it. I've got a job in sales. I went from the bottom of 1,500 people. He said, you knew what I was like when you met me. I sold my car to come and work with you. He said, now I'm the number 3 salesperson in this organization. My confidence is high. I've got $2 million worth of on-target earnings. The very next year, he says, my relationship with my daughters is the best it's ever been. I'm in a new loving relationship and I'm training all the people in this organization.
Wow.
So he went back and he had to release lifetime traumas. Now, I don't know if it's true, but it was true for him, and he had a real world improvement in his confidence.
Wow.
And so we have taken thousands of people through. Some of my groups, I'll take 1,300 people at a time through these past life regressions. Regressing, that's amount of people at once. And they have these phenomenal experience. People can recall the time when they were in their mother's womb. This will blow your mind. A client that I know, I have known her for 35 years, but I know nothing of the inside operations of their family. She said, Daniel, when I was doing a past life regression in you, she said, I can recall the time of conception. And I said, what was happening at the time of conception? She said, my father wanted to have sex. And my mother said, no, I'm fertile. I can't afford to have sex and fall pregnant again. We can't afford another child. The father pushed. They had sex. She fell pregnant. 3 months later, this is exactly what my client said to me. I remember my mum coming and telling my father that she's pregnant. And you know what the father said? Get rid of it. She says, I can remember that when I was in the womb. She recalled all this and she was telling me. And I said, what I want you to do, I said, I know your father's dead. I want you to go and ask your mother if this conversation took place at the time of conception. I know her mother. She went and asked her mother. She said, Mum, I want you to be really honest with me. I've just had this experience. Did this happen at the time of conception? And the mother said, word for word, that's exactly what happened. She said, at 3 months, did you tell Dad that you were pregnant? And the first thing he said to you was, get rid of it. And the mother just lost it. She started to cry. Now, this young woman, and this is how it impacts our lives, she felt that detachment. She felt that abandonment from the 3rd month in the womb. She could recall it. See, everything you've seen, heard, felt, tasted, smelled, experienced exists in the body, and you can recall it in hypnosis and regression. And for her entire life, she was always trying to prove to her father that she was worthy of his love. Even, this will blow your mind, the father got cancer, and she wanted to show her father how much she loved him. And she said to me, nobody should die alone with cancer. Within 3 to 6 months, she had cancer herself.
What a connection.
Proving to her father that she was lovable. And so for her entire life, she has been dealing with this issue of abandonment, and it started in the womb. I've got it all documented. I've got it on video. I have her doing the speech.
Wow.
One of our good friends there in Sydney.
Wow. So when people are going through this regression, they're not in the present state, are they? They're under hypnosis? They're hypnotized?
They're in the present state. And this is what's exciting about the method that we use, is that we use a process and it integrates the conscious and the unconscious mind.
Right.
So normally in a state of hypnosis, it's the power of the hypnotherapist over the individual. But the way we do it today, we guide our clients through and we make no suggestions to what's happening. So I don't suggest to the client, this is happening in the womb. I don't make any suggestions. I'm just guiding them how to go into that altered state of trance to get the two minds functioning together. I make no suggestions at all. So if you go to, a psychic or a tarot reader, they might say, oh, well, in your lifetime, 35 lifetimes ago, this happened to you. That's somebody else's power over you. My clients tell me what's happening.
Yes.
So there's no external interference or there's no implanting of memories, which is what a lot of people do in past life regressions. They tell you. No, my clients tell me what's happening, and they're totally conscious the whole time. It's just an altered state of consciousness.
Right. So it's not like when you see hypnosis on TV and people are like this, they've fallen asleep and
That's what people are scared of. They go, my business clients go, Daniel, are you going to make us cluck like a chicken? I said, if you want me to, I definitely can. But it's not my intention. They'd say, well, I'd prefer not to.
Wow. So they're pretty much just like how I am right now, but an altered state of mind. But I'm still here, present, talking to you about whatever I'm visualizing or seeing in my mind.
Absolutely, 100%. So it's our unconscious mind that stores all of our memories. Everything we've seen, heard, felt, touched, smelt, tasted exists within the unconscious mind. And the way that we can get full recollection of these memories is to get the two minds working together.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that's really fascinating is our unconscious mind is symbolic. So it talks to us in symbols. So when it says you were alive 2,000 years ago, it doesn't mean that you were necessarily alive 2,000 years ago. It gives you an image as a connection piece that says, hey, if you can understand this, then you can deal with that problem. See, the unconscious mind works very different to the conscious mind. It has a totally different set of principles, and it's symbolic in nature. So this is what I say to my clients. I can't prove that you were alive 2,000 lifetimes ago, but I can't disprove that you weren't.
Yeah.
But if your mind believes that this event took place,
Yeah.
it's real for you. Wow. So we've got to understand how the unconscious mind works as we do regressions. One young woman said to me, Daniel, I can't sleep. And I said, okay, what happened? She says, I go to bed and I hear this voice. I want your body. I want your body. And she then said, I feel like something's trying to push me out of my body.
Yeah.
Now, in the Taiwanese culture, they accept that notion of spirit. They believe in past lives. So when we did a past life regression, she went back 5,000 years ago. And she's telling me what's happening. She says, Daniel, I can see myself. I'm dressed in traditional Chinese clothing. I'm on this cobblestone street. And I'm standing there, and there's a boy beside me. He must be my boyfriend. She explains to me what happened. She said, I know what's happening in this event. I'm trying to leave him, but he doesn't want me to leave. Now, what happened in the memory, she said, I told this man that I'm going to leave him. And the last thing he said was, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself. Now, she just thought he was joking. And she said, that's it, the relationship's over. And in the memory, he took a knife and he cut his throat open in the memory. And then the last thing, as the blood's gurgling out of his neck, he said, I'm going to come back for your body. And when she's in this memory, she said, Daniel, that's the voice. That is the voice that says, I want your body. I want your body. So she made that connection. Now, this is a young woman who couldn't sleep. She couldn't get a job. She couldn't be in a relationship because this was so traumatic. After she resolved that memory, she got a job. She started to sleep. She started to date. She got married. She's got a baby and she's happy in her life.
Wow.
All because she resolved some memories. And if you talk to her, she'll say, that was absolutely true for me.
Yes. So can past life regressions help people who have physical issues, like, people who have, I don't know, maybe some sort of migraine attacks all the time, or they have heart palpitations all the time, or they're always something's going wrong in their body, but they can't link it to something in this life. Can undergoing that help them? And if so, how do they know, and how does this help?
If you've had all the medication and you've still got the problem, if you've been diagnosed and that didn't fix the problem, then most likely it's something that resides in the mind. And according to Dr. David Simerton, 80% of disease in the body is psychosomatic in nature. It's where your mind is making your body sick. How many times have you been stressed, totally stressed out, overthinking everything, and then 2 or 3 weeks later you end up with the flu? Have you noticed that? 2 to 3 weeks later, then you go, oh, why am I sick? Well, you've totally forgotten that 2 or 3 weeks ago you were an emotional wreck.
Yes.
And when we have a lot of unresolved emotions in the body, it depletes our energy. What we've got to start to understand is that if you've got a lot of unresolved anger, that anger calcifies the heart and it can lead to a heart attack. If you've experienced a lot of sadness in your life, it leads to depression. And what happens, it impacts your immune system. If you've experienced a lot of conflicts in your life, people who have experienced a lot of conflict and it's unresolved, it always leads to cancer.
Wow.
No doctor's going to talk about this.
Past life, you mean, sorry? Do you mean conflicts from the past life or present?
It could be present, it could be past, or it could be genealogical. We don't really know until we work with the individual because everybody is so dynamic. So a lot of people aren't talking about this. When you go to the traditional doctor, hey, I'm not knocking the medical system. It's not their job to deal with past life traumas. What they can do is they can give you a pill to try to take away some of the symptoms. And if it doesn't work, they're going to refer you to somebody else. And if you go to a psychiatrist and you say, this voice is saying, I want your body, I want your body, they'll probably label you and diagnose you with some medical condition and give you some medicine, and you'll take the medicine and the voice will still be there. So once people try that stuff, they often come and they have a look at these, they call it New Age, but it's nothing new. In India, in Japan, in China, they've been doing past life regressions for thousands of years. We're just rediscovering it. So my clients, I've worked with many people who've had cancer and they're in remission. I've worked with quadriplegics who have started to get, I'm not saying movement back in their body, but they're getting greater feeling in their body. It's quite interesting. I'm seeing people who were having psoriasis all over the body being cleared of psoriasis. I've seen people who have had visual impairments getting better clarity in their vision, because all of our unresolved negative emotions, they impact different parts of our neurology. So once people start to look in different areas, they're going to start to get a different result. And a lot of people are turning to this because they say, I don't want medicine, because I know if I take that pill, it's going to make me feel numb, but that voice is still going to be in there. I don't need a diagnosis. I know I'm not crazy, but I believe that there's something holding me back because nothing bad's happened this lifetime. So we're seeing this more and more, and It's a lovely experience. I love it. My wife and I do it on a regular basis because we want to perform. We want to have clear state of mind. We do some other work with business people around the world, and it's quite interesting what people come up with. And they say to me, Daniel, you wouldn't believe it. A lot of women come to our programs and they find that they can't get pregnant. After they've done our program, they fall pregnant. Not because of me. Because of my program.
Let's see that going. Oh, that's hilarious. Do you find that people might be scared or hesitant at the start before a regression? Like me personally, I want to do one, but my fear is how would I get into it? Is it something that happens on the day that I work with somebody who does it? Is it something you gently, I don't know, you start meditating and then you slowly after a while get into it? Do people freak out thinking that they're not in control of their own bodies? Because that's obviously one of my biggest fears is I'm not in control of me. Am I in control of myself when I do this, if I do this?
100%. 100%. And that's why we do it with people conscious. We don't want them in that deep state of trance, because what we have to be able to do is the conscious mind has to be able to get the learnings from the unconscious mind. And a lot of people, and if you've ever seen stage show hypnotism, they've jumped around and they jump around like a chicken, and then they totally forget it because the conscious mind wasn't awake.
Yes.
I'm opposed to that. Look, I think stage show hypnotism has its place. It's for extroverts who want to get up there and cluck around like a chicken. Only the people who want to do that. I won't do that because I don't want to do that. So we do it in a different way where people are conscious. So when do we do it? There's a little bit of pre-framing. So people have to have a level of understanding of what they're going to go through to put those fears to the side. People have to understand that they are in control the whole time and that they're safe. And so we normally take our clients through a program. Some people, we can do it within a matter of, 10, 15 minutes. Depending on how open their mind is to it. Other people, my wife and I will work with them for a couple of sessions. We'll learn more about them, more about what they want. We'll have a look at their detailed personal history. And then maybe on the 5th or 6th time that we work with them, that will start to take them through a regression. And there's a couple of reasons why. Is that if somebody has repressed memories in the past, and I'm not aware of this as the practitioner, then there is an opportunity that they may abreact. Now, imagine this, let's say you've been sexually abused and you didn't deal with it and you've repressed it your whole life. And this happens. I worked with a lady recently, she was 40 and she had been sexually abused twice from the age of 5 to 9. And she told me at the start, no, nothing wrong with me at all. I've had a wonderful life. But through my process, what I'm looking for, has there been any possible traumas? She had repressed the 2 times that she'd been raped. Consciously, she couldn't think about it because it was too painful. But with my techniques, I helped her discover it. Now, we don't want the client to go back into a traumatic memory like that. Nobody wants to relive that trauma. So my wife and I, we want to do our due diligence before we go into those regions of the mind, because reassociating somebody back into a traumatic memory does not help them move forward. No. It keeps them more trapped. So due diligence. And the other thing, Shalina, you've really got to trust your practitioner. You've got to be feeling safe with the practitioner. And the practitioner should be able to guide you through and say, hey, this is good for you, or maybe it's not the right time.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have a very diligent practitioner, somebody who has a proven technique and somebody that you feel comfortable with. That's the key to it. And then you get your best results.
Yeah, yeah. How do you know who's good at what they do? Is there a way to know before we go to them, or is it sort of like a trial by error type of thing? Because sometimes if you have a bad experience, you may never want to try it again, and that's also scary.
Yeah, well, I say to my clients, have you ever purchased anything that was cheap that ended up being really good? You might be a smoker and you buy a cigarette lighter and it bloody doesn't work. The flint pops out and you can't smoke your ciggy. Or you buy a cheap cask of wine, you wake up and you got a headache for the next week. So you got to look for somebody within your budget. That's very important. And really, somebody who's recommended. Work with somebody who comes recommended, or you've even experienced them. For somebody, for example, they might say, hey, I've watched this podcast. I feel really comfortable speaking to Shalina or Daniel. So research them. And you've got to also listen to your intuition. And if you get a good gut feeling about that person, go with it. And if you don't feel it's right for you right now, listen to your gut instinct and say, well, maybe this is not right for me right now, and keep searching. There's really no fast track way to it. For me and the coaches that I work with, we're very much about building rapport. The relationship is the most important thing when you're regressing. Do I feel safe? Do I feel comfortable? Has this person come recommended? And can I open up in front of this person? That's key.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, if anybody's thinking of doing this, I feel like doing this myself after hearing these stories, because there's a few things that I've got that I need to get off my chest. So it sounds really, really interesting.
Let me point that out to you. Something that I've got on my chest. See, everybody knows that their negative emotions weigh them down.
Yes.
And we feel them in the body. And so when you say to yourself, I can feel this on my chest, I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders, I've got this migraine headache, our body is talking to us. That's the unconscious mind saying there's something here that's weighing you down.
Yes.
That's how we know.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. That was a good share.
Well, I've got a few things. I've got a fear of water, swimming.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I think that's something there. I also have a fear. Well,
let me give you an example. Can I give you an example of that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so fear of swimming. Now, I'm not saying don't say this is gospel. Don't make a rule of this, anybody who's listening, about the fear of water. However, you got to think about it. The first traumatic experiences that we have are in the womb. Now, one of my very good clients in Melbourne, Australia, he had asthma and he always had a feeling of being choked. And when we did a past life regression, he recalled the time of birth. Now, think about Hollywood, childbirth. That's bullshit. Talk to a woman that you know who's given childbirth. They go, it's horrific. It's horrific. Yeah. And so this is a very traumatic time for the child. When he was born feet first. And then the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. So the doctors are trying to pull him out, but he's getting choked. So imagine baby, umbilical cord around the neck. Doctors are trying to pull it out feet first. The water's broken, but now he's choking inside. I can't breathe. He recalled this in the regression. And he came out and he said, that was phenomenal. He's like, I could see the doctors. I could feel the temperature. I could feel the utensils that they had on my head and they were trying to pull me out through the birth canal. And I said, how real do you think that was? He said, well, in my mind, I feel it was real. He said, but that choking feeling that I've always had is like, that just disappeared immediately. So we went back to his mum. Now, I know this guy and I have known him for a decade now, since he's worked with me. He went back to his mum and he said, Mum, I've been learning some of this stuff. I just want to ask you a question. When I was I born feet first? And she said, yes. And when I came out, was the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck? And she said, yes. And he said, was it really traumatic? And the doctors were really worried that if I'd survive. She said, yeah, because the umbilical cord was wrapped around your neck and you'd turn purple. And his mum validated everything that he said.
Wow.
So the message is that these fears, the unconscious mind, will present to you something symbolic like, I'm afraid of water. Mm. And once you understand what this communication with the unconscious mind is, you can start to discover what the root cause actually is for you. For my friend, asthma, pain in his neck, never left.
Yes.
And now it was in that moment of birth.
Wow. My second last question to you is, can people do this online? Like, for example, like meeting somebody Zoom, if I'm Zooming with you or something, can people do it that way?
100%. 100%. This is the best way. We used to do it face to face, and I used to work with police officers. I used to work with military people around the world, ambulance officers, and we used to do it face to face. But it was always a pain in the bum because they'd either have to travel to me to see me, or I'd have to go to them. And I used to go to people all the way over in the UK. But because of the technologies we have today, like Zoom, we don't have to leave our house and we can be in the comfort of our own home. So I went through a period a couple of years ago. I'd left Dubai, but I'd also been doing a lot of work online. And in the Islamic society, if you are raped in the Middle East and you report it, women don't report it because you're going to be the one who's in trouble. Now, that's just the law of the land, and that's the way it is. I'm not here to comment on that, but you've got to be careful because if you report it, you might end up in prison.
Yeah.
So I'd get a lot of women coming to me who'd been raped in the Middle East, and I was able to work with them over Zoom. And Zoom was perfect for them because they were able to resolve those past fears and move on with their life really, really fast.
Well, that's a good thing. At least people know that these things, these traumas, these things can actually be resolved. Because I was for some reason, I thought maybe I have to be with the person then and there in front of me. So
I got to get out my wristwatch. Tick, tock. That's why hypnosis has got a bad rap, because most people think it's about the hypnotherapist having this watch and being tick-tocking. It's totally different. It's not like that. That's Hollywood. All hypnosis is conversational. And if you can have a conversation face-to-face and you can have one online, it works the same. But there's also a process. So what my wife and I follow is a very structured process. So when we work with people, we can guarantee their results from the moment they walk in to the moment that they walk out, because we have a system. And the system that I use was designed by doctors 45 years ago, and it's been refined and fine-tuned. So my students, and I've got thousands of them around the world, I teach them these techniques and they can reproduce the exact same results as I get, because we have a process to follow that guarantees the client to be able to recall these memories from the past.
Wow. Can you do it to yourself if you learn it?
Yes and no. I can do it with myself, but very limited. It's like what we said when we opened up. We can't be our own therapist. Yes, I can remember moments in the past. However, I get stuck at certain places. Yeah. However, if I'm working with my wife who's trained, or if I'm working with one of my students, I can get far better results. Like a physio. You might twist your knee and you can massage it, but it's never as good as another physio performing the procedure on you.
Yeah. It's like a psychic who sometimes they don't use their psychic abilities on themselves.
Yeah, like a dentist. He can clean your teeth. He can use his Colgate toothbrush and his toothpaste, but he can't do his own fillings. He can't extract his own teeth. He can't give himself an injection. It's almost impossible for most people to give themselves a needle. It's very hard to do because we're so associated. We've got to be able to dissociate, and that's why they come to you as a counsellor. All humans must talk about their pains and their problems. We must all externalize this in order to move forward. When we internalize it, we repress it. But once we start to talk about it, we feel good. Everybody's had this conversation. Blokes know it. I'm going to go down the pub. I'm going to have a scooey. I'm going to sit beside a bloke that I don't know, and I'm going to tell him all the things I hate about my wife. And then on the way home, he feels so good about his wife. He buys her flowers, comes home, gives her a cuddle and kiss and says, I love you. You're the best wife ever. The girls do this. They go out to a party, they have a couple of champers, and they bitch and moan about their husbands, and they go home, they have crazy, wild sex. And they go, gee, God, I love my husband. It's because they've just got it off there, like you said before, just got it off my chest.
Yes,
just off the chest.
100%. So before we go, I wanted to ask you, do you have any advice for people watching, in any general advice or any type of advice or anything you want to leave people with to think about, or and also I'm just going to put up your Facebook and Instagram. They can literally search you, isn't it, Daniel Tolson?
Beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah, come and hang out. You'll see a picture of mine on Facebook. My friend says I look like I'm from the movie Yellowstone. I'm in my R.M. Williams boots, my blue jeans, and my shearling jacket. So you'll find me there on Facebook. 3 pieces of advice. First one, in order to make a permanent change in your life, you have to let go of your negative emotions and your limiting decisions. You've also got to be able to set your goals. What we know is that 85% of our motivation comes from the future. Our goals are for our future, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in your future. So if you've got unresolved things from the past and you don't deal with them, you're going to drag that shit into your future. So you've got to learn to let go of it. Secondly, once you do let go of these limitations, you must take action. And that action, and we mentioned it before, you've got to leave these physical environments. You have to break away from these environments and these relationships that do not serve the greater good. You've got to move on from that. And that's tough, but it must be done. And then thirdly, you must enforce your boundaries. You've got to look at those perpetrators, those abusers, and say, you are never allowed to tell me what I can and can't do. You are never to lay a hand on me for the rest of your life. And if you do, motherfucker, these are the consequences. And you tell them those fucking consequences right now.
That's right.
And then what they will do is they will test you. And what you've got to do is you've got to lay down the law really fast. And when you lay down the law and you deliver those consequences, they will back off straight away because they're going to test you to see how powerful you are. Or you've got to do it once. You will feel more powerful and their power will start to deplete. So you've got to enforce your boundaries, and that's where you get your personal power from. And if you say you're going to make the change and you do make the change, you'll become more powerful. And eventually you'll have so much personal power that nobody will ever be able to take advantage of you or your family ever again. Do those three things. You'll be fine. You'll live a super life. We're going to part that Red Sea, and that's the promised land. That's where we're going.
Exactly right. If I could just add to that, if anybody's feeling like they're suffering trauma or they're suffering something, just remember, if you don't resolve your traumas now, if you choose to have children, they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer your baggage that you haven't dealt with. Your children will be on the receiving end of your anger management problems, your addictions, your whatever it is that you're feeling and you're going through. Your children will be on the receiving end of it, and they're going to be traumatized. And if they don't heal, their kids are going to be traumatized. And this thing is going to continue to be passed down. So please remember that whatever you're doing right now, it can affect generations to come. It really can. And lived experience, I've seen it, I've heard it. So many people have gone through it. So we know it. Generational trauma, people.
The buck stops here. The buck stops here.
It all stops here. Yes. Wow.
What a great conversation.
Oh my God. I want to have you on again.
Let's
Honestly,
do it again.
We have to do this again. I haven't had enough of you yet.
Well, I'm going to set the standard for the men, and I say to my wife when I go to live events, I say, I like to be the first speaker. And I say to my audience, I say, this is the goal for our time together. I'm going to give you more ideas per minute than any other speaker. In this event, we're going to have more comments, more interaction than anybody else. I like to set the bar so high. So we've set the bar high. Let's do it again. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. More conversations to come. Thank you so much. I feel rude cutting you off, but we've smashed out so much for people to think about. Watch this in parts. You don't have to watch it all at once if you don't want to. And
Game of Thrones. You got to watch the whole episode.
Oh, yes, that's right.
You got to start and keep going.
And please connect with Daniel on all social medias. There is so much amazing things that he's putting out there for you to learn and grow every single day. You know, don't miss out on advice and knowledge from somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about. He knows what's going on. He knows what's going on. So people, you better start following him.
Do it now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
I dare you.
I better get a drink of water and go off and do some past life regressions with my clients this afternoon.
Sounds interesting. You've got me curious. I'm literally going to be sitting here thinking about what to do and when I should do it. Because I'm coming to you if I'm doing it. Because
come and do it. You'll love it. And as the Greeks said, you've got to know thyself. They had a maxim of know thyself, and you're going to start to learn different parts about yourself. Once you start to learn different parts about yourself, you'll realize that you are different, and different means good. We want to be unique in this lifetime. There was a time in my life where I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be the same as everybody else. But now I say, fuck that. I want to be me. I want to give the world my uniqueness. I'm here. Daniel Tolson's taken. I'm going to be the best version of myself. And once we start to explore these different parts of our mind, we start to realize that we can bring value to other people's lives that nobody else can bring because of our past pain. And what I'd like to leave everybody with is that you've got to turn your pain and you've got to start to profit from your pain. You've got to turn that shit into sugar. And once you start to talk about it, other people say, oh my gosh, you are so strong, you're so powerful, you're such an inspiration. If you can do it, I can do it. And remember,
Yes.
you might make a change today and it will impact so many people. It's a ripple effect. It always happens. So you do it for your future generations, and then you'll be able to predict the success of your families. You'll have a very important, successful family, and people will respect and admire your family name. You can do it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Pain to power, purpose, pleasure, and profit. Why
Turn
not?
that shit into sugar. Yeah, profit from your pain. I've done it.
I love that. I love
That's
that.
what we've got to do. Well, why else would you do it? Some of us come here and, let's 30 seconds. If you're a spiritual being, you might say, well, I want a different life experience. Test me. See how far you can push me in this lifetime. And then once I get all those learnings, I'm going to help other people overcome those same challenges. Sometimes there's things that you're just not aware of yet. And if your life journey was to have these experiences for the purpose of helping other people, then you're going in the right direction. Yes. So now you got to profit from your pain. If you went through 10 or 20 years of shit, now turn it into sugar. Make your best life out of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Oprah did. Oprah Winfrey, she did it. See, she turned the shit into sugar. All of us can do it. Yeah. Okay, we'll have to love you and leave you all.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you to the audience for watching and staying with us for the last hour and 40 minutes. Hope we have delivered something useful for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, you know where we are. You can send us a message. Daniel's ready and waiting if you need any help. Me too, ready and waiting. We're here for you, babes. So please, and look after your mind, body, and your soul. Your mental health matters. So please don't feel ashamed. There's no shame ever.
No shame. None at all.
No shame. Never.
Only the strong ask for help.
That's exactly right. So we will be back with another passionate chat, and I can't wait for that. So thank you so much for joining me, people, and thank you so much, Daniel.
My pleasure.
We'll see you in the next episode, so stay tuned.
Ciao for now. Thank you.